As the pace of anti-aging science accelerates and therapies aimed at slowing, halting, or even reversing aging edge closer to mainstream medicine, regulatory frameworks will be forced to evolve in parallel. This transition will be both necessary and transformative. For decades, aging has been treated by regulators as a natural process rather than a medical condition, which has meant that most interventions had to be approved for treating specific age-related diseases, like Alzheimer's or arthritis, rather than aging itself. But as interventions increasingly target aging at the root cause, cellular senescence, DNA damage, epigenetic drift, this old paradigm is rapidly becoming outdated. In its place, we are likely to see a new class of regulatory pathways built specifically around the biological processes of aging. These changes will not occur overnight, but they are inevitable. The pressure is already mounting as clinical trials for therapies like senolytics, telomerase gene therapies, partial reprogramming, and N80+ boosters begin to generate real-world data that cannot easily be classified under existing disease models. Current regulatory systems, especially those in the US, EU, Japan, and China, will need to define what qualifies as an anti-aging therapy, how to assess safety and efficacy, and what endpoints are appropriate for approval. Traditional endpoints like disease progression or mortality are slow and difficult to measure in the context of aging, which unfolds over decades. This is where the use of surrogate endpoints, such as validated biomarkers of biological age, becomes crucial. We are likely to see the formal acceptance of new biological aging clocks, methylation markers, proteomic signatures, transcriptomic data, etc., as part of the approval process. Already, regulators are informally acknowledging these tools in exploratory frameworks, but the next step is to create standardized, validated, and legally recognized biomarkers of aging. Just as blood pressure and LDL cholesterol became standard proxies for cardiovascular risk, we will likely see biological age reduction or improvement in functional resilience used as approved measures of longevity benefit. This will pave the way for therapies to be approved on shorter timelines, especially critical in a field where decades-long trials are impractical. To manage these shifts, new divisions or agencies within existing regulatory bodies may be created, much like what happened with pediatric drugs or orphan diseases. The FDA or EMA, for instance, might establish longevity innovation units tasked with handling aging-related therapeutics. These offices would set specific rules for how to classify, trial, and authorize treatments aimed at extending health span, rejuvenating tissue, or improving resilience. They would also develop ethical oversight frameworks for novel areas such as gene editing for healthy individuals, long-term epigenetic interventions, or interventions in middle-aged patients with no formal disease. In tandem, governments will likely have to create rules around how these treatments are marketed, especially in a consumer-facing environment where longevity products are already flooding the supplement and wellness markets. We anticipate more rigorous labeling standards and tighter restrictions on unsupported, anti-aging claims. However, there is also room for innovation. Just as the FDA created a fast-track process for life-threatening diseases, a similar designation could emerge for therapies that delay multimorbidity or prevent frailty. This would allow promising interventions to reach patients sooner, under close surveillance. Another emerging area is the regulation of periodic rejuvenation treatments. If therapies like partial cellular reprogramming prove safe in humans, they may be administered intermittently, like a vaccine booster for aging. Regulators will need entirely new guidelines for such treatments. How often can they be administered? What long-term follow-up is required? How should cumulative risk be assessed across decades of use in otherwise healthy individuals? These questions underscore the need for a fundamental rethinking of medical regulation in the context of aging as a chronic, progressive process rather than a set of discrete diseases. Ethical concerns will also prompt regulatory responses. Who gets access to anti-aging therapies? How are they priced? Are they covered by insurance or left to out-of-pocket markets? Could they exacerbate health inequality if they remain expensive and elite-driven? In anticipation, some countries may begin piloting longevity care as part of their public health models, viewing health span extension not as luxury medicine, but as a form of preventive care that reduces long-term healthcare burden. Regulations could be introduced to ensure accessibility, affordability, and safety, particularly as interventions begin to be used in midlife rather than in old age. Regulatory clarity will also benefit industry. One of the major barriers to investment in true anti-aging therapeutics has been uncertainty. If there's no clear path to approval, companies are hesitant to pursue costly clinical programs. But as governments define rules and endpoints, investors will become more confident, clinical trials will proliferate, and competition will drive rapid progress. The regulatory system, once seen as a bottleneck, will become an enabler of innovation, so long as it is agile enough to keep pace with science. In sum, anti-aging breakthroughs are forcing medicine and governance to adapt to a new reality. Aging is modifiable, and therapies that target its root causes are within reach. To safely guide these therapies from lab to clinic, regulators will build frameworks that are novel, responsive, and biology-based. These frameworks will likely span everything from new approval pathways and surrogate endpoints to ethical guidelines and public coverage rules. Aging will no longer be seen as a natural law beyond intervention, but as a frontier that, with the right oversight, can be managed, modulated, and perhaps one day, overcome.